The Road to 1994. How Mandela Made Democracy Real. The gates of Victor Verster prison opened on the afternoon of February 11, 1990. The world held its breath as Nelson Mandela, dressed in a simple suit, walked hand in hand with his wife Winnie. His stride was steady, his head high. And yet, behind that calm expression lay 27 years of captivity, sacrifice, and unshakable conviction. South Africa was watching. The world was watching. But freedom, Mandela knew, was not yet complete. The road ahead would be harder than the years behind bars. The air was electric that day. Crowds filled the streets, waving flags, chanting his name. But this was not just a celebration. It was the beginning of the most delicate, dangerous, and decisive chapter in South Africa's history. The country was still gripped by apartheid laws, racial division, and mistrust. Mandela's release was a symbolic crack in the wall of oppression, but to tear that wall down would require patience, strategy, and above all, unity. In his first speech as a free man, Mandela's voice carried both strength and caution. He thanked those who had fought for his release, but he made it clear. The struggle was not over. He did not call for revenge. He called for peace. We must forget the past and work together, he urged, knowing that anger could easily ignite a civil war. His mission was to dismantle apartheid, not with bullets, but with the power of negotiation and the vision of a shared future. The years that followed were a storm of talks, setbacks, and threats. Negotiations between the African National Congress, ANC, and the ruling National Party often teetered on collapse. Violence erupted in the townships. Extremists from both sides tried to sabotage the peace process. But Mandela refused to give up. He spent countless hours meeting not only with political leaders, but also with ordinary citizens, church groups, and business owners, anyone who could help bridge the divide. Mandela's greatest strength was his ability to listen. He sat across from the very men who had ordered his imprisonment, looking them in the eye and speaking not with bitterness, but with reason. He understood that reconciliation required the courage to forgive, even when forgiveness felt impossible. He did not see enemies, he saw potential partners in building a new nation. Then came 1993, a year of both hope and heartbreak. Mandela and President F.W. de Klerk were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to end apartheid. Yet the joy was shadowed by tragedy. The assassination of Chris Hani, a beloved ANC leader, threatened to push the country into chaos. Mandela took to the airwaves, his voice firm but filled with empathy. He urged South Africans not to let grief turn into rage, but to channel their pain into determination for peace. His words calmed a nation on the brink. Finally, in April 1994, the date was set. South Africa would hold its first democratic election, open to all races. The campaign was intense. Political parties mobilized across the country. But for Mandela, it was more than politics. It was the fulfillment of a dream generations had died for. He traveled tirelessly, visiting rural villages, crowded townships, and bustling cities, shaking hands, listening to stories, and assuring people that their voices mattered. The images from April 27, 1994 are forever etched in history. Endless lines snaked through streets and fields, millions of South Africans, many voting for the first time in their lives. Some had walked for miles, others stood for hours in the sun, but none complained. The atmosphere was charged with joy, disbelief, and pride. This was the day they had waited for. Mandela himself stood in line like any other citizen. When he placed his ballot into the box, it was not just a personal victory, it was the collective triumph of an entire nation. Tears flowed freely that day, not only from the elderly who had waited decades for this moment, but from young people who now inherited a future free from the chains of apartheid. On May 10, 1994, the world's eyes turned to under a clear blue sky. Nelson Mandela took the oath of office as South Africa's first black president. His inauguration was attended by dignitaries from every corner of the globe. But more importantly, it was witnessed by millions of South Africans, both in person and through their radios and televisions. In his speech, Mandela spoke with humility and hope. "We enter into a covenant," he said, "that we shall build a society in which all South Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without any fear in their hearts. He reminded the world that freedom alone was not enough. It must be accompanied by equality, justice, and opportunity for all. The journey from his release in 1992, that moment in 1994, had been one of extraordinary resilience. Mandela had faced threats, political deadlocks, and attempts to undermine his leadership. Yet he had never wavered in his belief that unity was the only path forward. The election did not erase South Africa's wounds overnight, but it opened the door to healing. Mandela's presidency marked the beginning of a new chapter, but the road to democracy had already taught the most important lesson. True leadership is not about ruling, it is about serving. It is about building bridges where walls once stood and choosing hope over hatred, even when hatred seems easier. The images of that era still inspire today. The long lines of voters, the handshake between Mandela and de Klerk, the children waving flags, the songs of freedom echoing in the streets. They remind us that change, no matter how impossible it may seem, is always possible when people choose dialogue over destruction and unity over division. As we reflect on those 4 historic years, from 1990 to 1994, we see not just the story of one man, but the story of a people who refused to let fear dictate their future. Mandela was their guide, their voice, and their symbol of hope. But the real power lay in the millions of ordinary South Africans who dared to believe that democracy could be real and then made it so. If Mandela's journey from prisoner to president has inspired you, share this story. Let it be a reminder that no matter how deep the divisions, unity is always worth fighting for. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that prove the human spirit can overcome even the greatest challenges. And remember, the road to change begins with a single step.